Someone dies in the UK every 90 minutes. 76% of these are male. What is going wrong?
If you were to point to a single point of failure, it would be the
Scott Galloway,
entrepreneur,
best-selling author,
professor,
one of the most desired minds when it comes to business and life. He is about the obsession of how to be better as individuals and as a society.
Society tells you, especially I think as a man, that your worth is highly correlated to your economic success. But for the first time, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents. Men under the age of 40 are 24% less wealthy. The average age of a first-time home buyer is 47 now. It's an online dating. You have to swipe right 1,000 times to get a single coffee. It's 1 in 7 men doesn't have a single friend. You're going to have men having relationships with machines. The most dangerous person in the world, a lonely, young, broke male. And we're producing millions of them. And that can lead to very ugly places for the economy and society.
What is the impact this is having on women?
Women have become better educated and they're making more money. It means that the quote-unquote pool of viable mates for women is going down every year.
And a lot of these men are finding role models online.
Yeah, this is a real issue. That this is a group that's struggling. On the far right, people like Trump, a criminal, Putin, murderer. On the far left, as far as I can tell, their vision of masculinity is to act more like a woman. I don't think that's right either. We need a new vision for modern masculinity.
Do we need individual solutions or do we need societal solutions?
My solutions are pretty straightforward. And this is the one I'm working through and will definitely get me in the most trouble.
Scott, it's quite clear that there is a crisis in society in different areas. I called a friend of mine who is called Simon Gunning before this conversation, literally 10 minutes ago. He heads up one of the largest mental health charities in the UK, and they specifically focus on suicide. They do a lot of work with men. And I said to him, can you tell me the latest stats on suicidality amongst men and purposeless and those kinds of things? And he said to me, someone dies by suicide in the UK every 90 minutes. 76% of these are male. There's 25 attempts for every death. It's the single biggest cause of death for men under 45, and it's the single biggest cause of death for 15 to 49-year-olds. And the category of 19 to 35-year-olds is twice as likely to report being in a crisis personally than any other group. And lastly, 16 to 24-year-olds are currently the fastest growing group in history to exhibit suicidality. What is going wrong in the way we've designed and the way that we're executing upon this vision of society?
I think even the way we frame the problem is incorrect. And that is when we talk about, if you were to say that women are 3 times as likely as men to kill themselves, I think we would talk about the problem through the lens of it being a societal issue, and we would immediately move to what investments and change in behavior and education would address that problem. When we say young men are killing themselves at 3 times the rate as young women, we use terms like accountability, or say things, well, if they just opened up more about their emotions, or they need to get their act together. And that is, we've decided when it comes to men, compassion is a zero-sum game. And that if you feel bad for men, it immediately kind of outs you as someone who might be anti-women or who's gone red pill. Because the void, the statistics are just staggering. 4 times more likely to be addicted, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. And because nobody was talking openly and honestly about those very real issues, that void created opportunity for what I think are some unproductive voices to fill that void and start speaking to these men. And naturally, a lot of people now have a gag reflex when they hear people talking about the problems around men. So the first is we need to frame the problem as this is a real issue that requires and deserves compassion and our sympathy. You know, it's not a zero-sum game. Civil rights didn't hurt white people. Gay marriage didn't in any way diminish heteronormative marriage. And so the first is to have a conversation that this is a group that's struggling, and to stop using terms like accountability and somehow blaming them for their own problems here. The 19-year-old male should not pay for the sins of his father or grandfather. Now, and my Yoda on this is Richard Reeves, but basically it comes down to kind of 3 things. The first is biological. Our prefrontal cortex does not mature as fast as a woman's. An 18-year-old woman from an executive function standpoint is like a 20-year-old male. So, or put another way, two seniors in high school applying to college, the woman is essentially competing against a 16-year-old. And that is her prefrontal cortex had that executive function that he has. She had it at 16. So we're seeing double the number of women graduating from U.S. colleges as men, because it's 60-40 ratio when they start, and then the ratio only gets worse because more men drop out. That still is an incredible on-ramp to influence and economic security. These men aren't getting on that on-ramp. So there's biological reasons. There's also, I think the education system is just biased against men. A boy is twice as likely on a risk-adjusted basis or a behavior-adjusted basis to be suspended for the exact same activity as a girl who's brought into the principal's office for this exact same infraction. You're sitting in front of me as a guy, you're twice as likely to be suspended for cheating on your chemistry test as a girl coming in. A black boy is 5 times as likely to be suspended as a girl. So we have a real bias. Now, part of that is that 90% of primary school teachers are women. There are more female fighter pilots per capita than there are male kindergarten teachers. Men are not going into early stage education. And this is really important because you have an entire cohort of boys who grow up. If you were to point to a single point of failure where all of this starts, if you said, where did this young man come off the tracks? If you tried to identify one signal through all the noise, it would be the following. When the boy no longer has a male role model. And with incarceration, with male abandonment, and with a lack of teachers in primary school, you have an entire generation of young men who grow up having never had a male role model. And so a lack of male role models, an education system that is biased against them, and then I think economic policies, whether it's the outsourcing of manufacturing jobs, the transfer of wealth from young to old people, and you think, well, the fact that someone over the age of 70 is 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago, and someone under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy, that affects men and women. I think it's especially hard on men because I think men are still primarily evaluated in terms through the lens of their economic vitality. So they're biologically behind women, have an education system biased against them, and we have economic policies that have created a great deal of shame and rage. And the last point I would just say is for the first time in Europe and America's history, a 30-year-old is not doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. And that creates just tremendous shame and rage. I mean, look at the housing market. The average age of a first-time home buyer is 47 now. In 1980, the average age of a first-time home buyer was 29. Young people have been sequestered from whatever you call, loosely speaking, the American dream or the UK dream. So the odds are just the forces in the face of young men have just become greater and greater, and it's manifesting in a lot of different ways. Lower marriage rates, lower birth rates, and skyrocketing in suicide. I should also add that suicide is way up among teen girls because of social media. So different challenges at different ages.
You're committing a lot of your time to both talking about this, but writing about this subject matter. Mm-hmm. Why? Why does it matter so much to you personally? Of all the things, because you're one of those individuals, and I spoke to your team and they kind of echoed this, that is very diverse in their ability to speak about subject matter. You could talk about investing or money or business or happiness, but for some reason you've honed in, it seems, in part, to solve this challenge that young men specifically are facing. Why? Why you?
Well, did you have 2 parents?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a single mother. I was installing because I'm that guy. I'm that guy that as a kid, didn't have a male role model. We were in what I affectionately call an upper lower middle class household. My mother lived and died a secretary. I just could have easily come off the tracks and almost did a few times. And because government stepped in and because of things like Pell Grants, which are financial aid for kids in the lower, I think, quartile of income earning houses, because the University of California saw themselves as public servants, not as luxury brands, and they let in 76% of applicants. And I got rejected the first time. So I was one of the 24% that didn't get in, and then I got in again. But the big hand of government lifted me up. And also, I had a lot of strange men step in, a stockbroker, a baseball coach, a neighbor. I had all these wonderful men kind of step in. And between the warm embrace of government in America that used to love unremarkable people, men who stepped in, this is nothing but, for me, I relate to these young men, and I see an opportunity. There aren't a lot of people. I just think the problem is so much greater than the emotion and the bandwidth and the resources being allocated to it. And it's just simply, kind of a nod to the institutions and the men that helped me. And also, to be blunt, it's a commercial opportunity. It's a chance to talk about something it's a white space. It's so obvious. If you think of yourself as a thought leader, you want to be fearless and you want to move the needle on stuff. So this for me was just, slowly but surely, you just look at the data and it all leads to one place. And that is young men have fallen further faster than any cohort in America and Europe. And it needs to be addressed and talked about.
This idea that it all comes back to, do you have a male role model in your life, links, interestingly, to a lot of the data that says we're less likely to be married than ever before. We're less likely, I was reading some stats around when our first kiss happens. And a man's first kiss used to happen, I think it was around 18. It's now on average into their early 20s.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be moving further and further and back. So from that, I deduce that the chance that a young man would have a male role model in their life is probably deteriorating as well, because there's less marriages. There seems to be the prospects of dating seem to have dropped as well. So is there correlation between these two things in some respect?
Yeah, what's strange is, so you don't have kids, right?
No.
What's weird about raising kids now is that my mom was worried about me getting into too much trouble. I think what's fairly common now among parents is we're worried our kids aren't going to get into enough trouble. And that is, we see the power of unsupervised play. We see the power of maybe sneaking into a movie and getting caught. We see just that it's important that at some point kids are going to experiment with alcohol and drugs, and kind of better they ease into it as opposed to never do anything and then end up at college their freshman year and just can't handle the onslaught of it. So, I think that there's something about the concierge and bulldozer parenting where we use so many sanitary wipes on a kid's life that they don't develop their own immunities. 40% of Harvard's incoming freshman class are virgins. And I worry that, this is going to sound strange. We have too little teen pregnancy. What do I mean by that? Unplanned teen pregnancy is a bad thing. But we have had such dramatic falls in that and drunk driving accidents, which is great. But what it signals, quite frankly, is that kids are so overprogrammed and have such a lack of socialization now. The number of high school teenagers that sees their friends every day has been cut in half, that we're slowly but surely sequestering from each other. And when we do that, we become less mammalia. We're mammals. We're literally, if you have dogs are happiest when they're lying on top of you. The worst thing you can do to a dog is leave it alone all day. And what we're doing to young people is they are leaving others and themselves alone all day. We're separating from each other. We're becoming less social. And there's a group of men who aren't received well at school, don't find a source of pride. Auto shop, metal shop, wood shop's gone away. They go online to date. The majority of them get rejected. If your average attractiveness in online dating, you have to swipe right 200 times to get a single coffee. If you set up 5 coffees, you'll get 1 will actually show up. 4 of the 5 will ghost you and decide later on they don't actually want to meet up. So a young man of average attractiveness in online dating has to swipe right 1,000 times. So he gets validation for 1 coffee. He gets validation that he has no worth to the other sex. He loses confidence. He starts engaging with people because he has less opportunities for random encounters where he has to develop those skills. And slowly but surely he sequesters from society, and at some point, he just is not really savable. He just never develops those skills around friendship or romantic relationships. In the United States, 1 in 7 men doesn't have a single friend. 1 in 4 can't name a best friend. In addition, marriage has become now a luxury item. If you're in the upper quartile of income-earning households, there's a 3 in 4 chance you're going to get married. If you're in the lower quartile, the lowest quartile, there's only there's a 3 in 4 chance you will never get married. So we have a group of the most dangerous person in the world. We're producing millions of them, and that is a lonely, young, broke male. And just bridging into AI, I think the biggest danger in AI, that people are worried about it becoming sentient. I don't buy any of that. Or super weapons. I think that's a problem, but we've managed through those things, bioweapons, et cetera, before. I think the biggest problem that AI presents is that big tech presents a series of low-calorie, low-risk entry points into what feels like a reasonable facsimile of a relationship. I think I'm making friends online. No, but you're not really experiencing friendship. I think I'm in a relationship with somebody. Well, are you really? I'm learning. No, you're not. You're gambling on Coinbase or Robinhood. And rather than endure the rejection and try and develop the skills and make the effort, and it is an effort and involves rejection, of going out into the physical world and revealing yourself as someone who would like to be friends with another man, express romantic interest, take those risks. We're developing these digital analogs of life that create low entry, low risk relationships. And you think, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is, because it leads to depression. Because the reason why romantic comedies are 2 hours and not 20 minutes is that life is about the victory of taking risks, enduring rejection, and having a small business that works. About approaching someone and getting the interview, cold emailing someone and getting a coffee, and quite frankly, pursuing someone and developing the skills and deciding to put on a clean shirt and maybe shower more often and maybe hit the gym every once in a while and maybe text when you're not sure how this person feels about you, and figure out a way to interact with someone around the nuance and develop the skills around human sexuality such that you can develop a relationship. That is the victory. That's the payoff after the 2 hours. And fewer men are engaging in those risks and that victory. And I think that AI, in combination with sex bots, is going to create an industry where men start having relationships with algorithms and dolls. Supposedly the sex bot industry is going to be bigger than the domestic box office receipts of all movie theaters in the US within 5 to 6 years. So we're going to have men having relationships with machines and dolls as opposed to other humans. And I think it creates a level of depression. I think Her should be required watching for every teen male. And I think every teenager in high school should have a course as part of health on mating dynamics, where they teach especially young men that approaching a woman and expressing romantic interest while making her feel safe is a skill, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that the end game, a relationship, a partner, a romantic partner, is one of the keys to a happy life. And I think most studies bear that out. And we are sequestering, for a variety of reasons, men from the opportunities to have those relationships. And it also impacts women. But what we're seeing with women is 2 in 3 under the age of 30 have a boyfriend. Only 1 in 3 men have a girlfriend, because women are dating older. They want more economically and emotionally viable men.
On the point of sex bots, it's almost impossible for me to see how that doesn't become a huge part of male dating. You know, I was speaking to Mustafa Solomon, who was one of the co-founders of...
I know Mustafa.
Yeah. One of the co-founders of DeepMind, which sold to Google. And in his new book, The Coming Wave, he talks about how all of these breakthroughs in technology, one of which is AI, one of which is robotics, is going to sort of intersect with the ability to have literally someone in your house who can not only clean your house and do the dishes and make your lunch, but also can love you. Mm-hmm. In whatever artificial form that love comes. They can agree with everything you say, they can encourage you, and they can have sex with you. Mm-hmm. And dare I say, and I'm sure this might be clipped by somebody, there is a certain cohort of men who would rather choose that than nothing. And when they're faced increasingly with that choice, it feels really inevitable to me to see how they would choose, some of them would choose a sex bot or something to that effect to fill that void.
We can all relate to that. We all make that type of decision in different increments. A lot of times it's easier to say, I'm just going to stay home and watch Netflix and take an edible and
porn,
order in, and maybe watch porn instead of go out and engage in the expense, the emotional trauma, the effort, the skills I have to provide to try and establish something resembling a real world relationship. And rejection is enormously painful. And, I think teaching young people rejection, and my son didn't make the football team last week, and he's 13 years old. And it was a big deal. He was really upset. He thought this was the way he integrated into the UK. He loves football, tried out. Tryouts are going really well. Came home, threw his bag down, tears, didn't make the football team. And of course, his mother's totally freaked out. What do we do? And I'm like, this is an awful day for all of us, and it's a great day for him, because this is what's going to happen. He's going to wake up tomorrow and he's going to realize he's fine. And he's going to develop a little bit of callous over that emotion. And I think you're an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I was single most of my adult life. I don't know your relationship status, but if you're an entrepreneur and you're single, you're used to enduring rejection. And that is the key to success. That's the absolute key, because the only thing that has happened in someone who's very successful professionally and personally is they have developed the skills to endure rejection. That's just it. No one bats 1,000. You approach strange women in a strange place. Most of the time it's going to be awkward, and sometimes it's going to be humiliating because you're going to get rejected. You want to start a business, you keep asking people for money, you keep asking employees to join you, you keep asking for customers and clients, and the only thing I can guarantee you is a shit ton of rejection. The ability to endure that rejection is absolutely the key to success. More so than talent, more so than I wouldn't say hard work, I'd say grit is right up there. But your ability to endure rejection is if you want to punch above your weight class economically or romantically, then get out a spoon and get ready to eat shit. That is a prerequisite to that kind of success. And technology is enabling people to say, well, why subject yourself to that risk? You can engage in something that feels sort of similar without any risk at all. And over the long term, it's just such a bad trade. I mean, you were talking about porn. Porn is the largest unsupervised experiment on young men that we've ever had. And it's largely unsupervised because there isn't a lot of academic research on it, because most academics don't want to be known as the porn professor. So there really is a lack of research around it. And when I coach young men, the first thing I do, kind of my go-to, is I get their phone, I look at screen time. I'm like, okay, let's think of what do you have as a young person? You have a lack of financial capital, but you have a lot of human capital. And that's really important, time. So we're going to think about your time as money, and we're going to decide how we're going to invest it. Let's look at your current portfolio of investments. And I ask them to unlock their phone, and I say, I won't be judgmental. In between Twitter, TikTok, porn, Coinbase, it's so easy to find a minimum of 10 and sometimes up to 50 hours a week. And we're going to reallocate it. And we're going to reallocate it to other things. And one of the things we're going to reallocate it to is, like, first we got to make some money. Are you making any money? You got to make some. I don't care if it's flipping on an Uber app. I don't care if it's becoming an Instacart, a Dasher. The best way to make a lot of money is to start making a little bit, because you start developing the skills and the hunger for more money, right? The second is we're going to take some time and we're going to try and invest in organizations or activities that put us in the company of random strangers. Not just potential romantic interests, but friends, mentors. That's super important. And one of the keys to developing what I'll call the mojo to take those risks around romantic relationships is to moderate your consumption of porn. One of the only reasons I graduated from UCLA was because one of my motivations for going to class was not only that I wanted to learn, not only that I needed to learn to graduate, I was a terrible student, but the prospect of potentially meeting a woman who I could take to one of my fraternity parties, or that ultimately might be interested in me romantically and sexually. And if I'd had the access to porn that young men have now, I'm not sure that mojo would have been as great to get out of the house as often. So just to tell young men not to engage in porn, I think is sort of ridiculous. But look at it analytically and think, okay, would you be more inclined to get out of the house, take those risks, engage in the victory, engage in what it is to be a man and be a mammal, if you had reallocated some capital and ensured that that fire was still there? So modulating porn and more generally spending less time online. Every digital version of your life is a shittier vision of the analog version that could happen. But everyone said, I'd rather have shitty kind of okay TV that's just mind-numbing as opposed to putting in the effort to do something great. But I think it's more than just porn. I think it's all of it. Why leave the house? Why endure that sort of rejection, effort, expense? It's not just so expensive to go out, right? So, but I think porn is one of those things that young men need to modulate and find, and such that they get their mojo.
This all has knock-on effects for women. And I think the data is also suggesting that the crisis amongst men is causing, in many situations, a crisis for women as well. Because we both, men and women exist in an ecosystem that needs to be somewhat balanced. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to talk about the impact this is having on women. One of the things I found interesting, it's actually because of a young woman came up to me in a bookshop. I was just there looking for my own book, as you do, just because it just come out. And she said something to me that a lot of women that have approached me or DM'd me have said quite frequently, which is she's over the age of 30 now. Mm-hmm. She's committed much of her life to her career. She's single. Mm-hmm. She's tried dating apps and she doesn't enjoy it. And part of me started to think about the fact she might be caught in a sort of generational gap where they used to meet in person, but now the generation below her meet online. And she concluded what she was saying to me with the fact that she believes, or she's starting to believe, that maybe there's something wrong with her. Because she's over the age of 30, she's single, she can't find a partner. She told me she's never had a boyfriend. Mm-hmm. She's killing it in her career. Mm-hmm. And she was in that bookshop looking for advice from a book. Mm-hmm. And I feel compelled, because I know she listens to this podcast, to ask as many people as I can the question to find an answer for her, because there's someone very close to me in my life who I literally text when I left the bookshop and I said, I've just met you in the bookshop. Mm-hmm. Every sentence that woman said to me in the bookshop is the exact word for word, even like I've tried going to the gym and that's not working, is the same as a close friend in my life, one of my best friends, has said to me as well. And there's not just one in my personal life, there's 3 or 4.
Well, we all know women, I'm sure this happens to you all the time, really interesting, high character, successful, attractive women, usually in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s, who will say, I can't find anyone to date. And it's not that they can't find anyone to date, it's that they can't find anyone they want to date. And there's some dynamics here. The first is...
Can I just interject to validate your point there? She also said to me, I'm not willing to drop my standards.
Well, and it's like Warren Buffett said, the key to a healthy marriage is low expectations. What's happening is, and I think his name's Chris Williams. He kind of reminds me of you. He's this handsome young podcaster who's blowing by all us old guys. Do you know Chris?
Yeah, I know Chris.
Anyways, he does a fantastic job, and I've learned a lot from him. But he calls it the high heels effect. And that is, every year for the last 50 years, women have become better educated and they're making more money. In urban centers, they've now, under the age of 30, blown by. They're now making more money. More single women in the U.S. own houses than single men. They're getting taller every year. And the reason he uses height is that 50% of women say they won't date a guy shorter than them. It's probably more like 80%. And even if they're not cognizant of it, just anthropologically, subconsciously, they're just usually not attracted to men shorter than them because they have something telling them that this individual is less likely to be able to physically protect you. So you're just at a disadvantage from a height standpoint. Now, metaphorically, women are getting taller every year and men are getting shorter, right? Men mate socioeconomically horizontally and down, women horizontally and up. But when the pool of men who are socioeconomically senior to women, it just means that the quote unquote pool of viable mates for women is going down every year. And women have been told they can have it all. And what I found is you can't have it all. Or let me put it this way, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. and that to focus on their careers, which, by the way, I think is a good thing. I think economic viability is just super important for everyone, including women. But the reality is, as they have gotten taller, men have gotten shorter, so there's just less pairing. Society has a tendency to evaluate a woman's success through the lens of her romantic success, not as much for men. People look at you and think, and I don't know your relationship status, but people look at you like, guy who's killing it. He's killing it, and he's single. Oh my God, it's good to be Stephen Bartlett. A woman in her 30s who's killing it professional is alone. It's like super successful, but your single status is a feature. For women, it's seen as a bug, and you both might be just as lonely. But or you might be engaging in, and I'm projecting here, I have no idea what your situation is here, but there's this dynamic where the men who are in the top 10% can engage in Porsche polygamy. And that is women with online dating now believe, there's something wrong with this, that, and this is going to get me in trouble, but let's rate everybody. Most people will acknowledge that some people are more attractive than others, and they find certain people less and more attractive. A woman of average attractiveness can have a relationship, and when I say relationship, that's code for sex, with someone who's in the top 10%. But that individual is probably not going to establish a long-term relationship. And because of the lack of friction and connection and meeting people via text message or online dating, the top 10% of men are getting 80+ percent of the opportunities for short-term relationships or sex. So they can engage in what's called Porsche polygamy, and that there's not a lot of motivation for them to establish long-term relationships, which leads to bad behavior and a lack of household formation. So the guys that most women want and believe that they should be in a relationship with are the least likely to establish a long-term relationship. And then the bottom 90 either have little or absolutely no interest from women. So I want to be clear, no woman is responsible for servicing a man. But what I think has happened is this dynamic where, because online has given everyone access to everyone, the majority of women are all interested in the same group. And this group is now much less likely to engage in a long-term relationship. And the result is just there's a disproportionate number of men and women who, quite frankly, are just lonely. But men have a tendency, when they don't have a romantic relationship, to not only not have that romantic relationship, but then they have fewer friends. They go out less. They're less professionally successful. You know, if I didn't have a mate who told me we need to save for a house, I'm not sure I wouldn't have been smoking pot and drinking every night. You know, she was like, if you want to continue to have a relationship and have sex with me, you've got to get your shit together. Young men need that. They need the guardrail of a romantic interest, the cocktail or the peanut butter and chocolate of a household where one person is more risk aggressive. You know, that's really important. And pushing the boundaries of what can be done. And then another person who's more practical. And that oftentimes goes into gender roles. Not always, and sometimes it's flipped. But that's a powerful combination. 1 + 1 really does equal 3. And across every species, you see that the majority of really wonderful things, including offspring, but other things in terms of building a society, are a mix of different attributes. And so we have just fewer and fewer of that peanut butter and chocolate in households. There are now more people not only living alone, but living with their parents than ever before, because they're not establishing this relationship. So it's absolutely bad for women, but typically, women still are economically successful, still find places to put that love, and quite frankly, don't start killing themselves or killing others. So it's not that it's any less bad, but the knock-on effects tend to be less bad for society.
And I went through the research from the Pew research, but also from the sort of Centers of Disease Control, just to clarify some of these numbers for women as well. And they cement everything you've said. Only 13% of women over 30 were married in 1970. That number has now risen to almost half. The divorce rate for women over 30 has doubled in the past 50 years. In 1970, only 10% of women over 30 were childless. Today, that number has risen to almost 30%. In 1970, only 28% of women over 30 were earning more than their husbands. Today, that number has risen to almost 50%. And in 1970, only 12% of women over 30 were living alone. Today, that number has risen to 35%. And on the point of loneliness, I was looking at how many men versus how many women have a best friend. And it's multiples more. So multiple more women still have relationships regardless of this state of affairs, because they're better at, as you say, forming social connections in non-romantic relationships with other women than men are. So it's a pretty bleak picture. And maybe most importantly of all, there's a clear direction of travel here. Mm-hmm. And if you extrapolate out that direction of travel, we don't get to a good place. Population decline you spoke of, and how that lopsided society, depression, mental health, suicide. So the question becomes, for me, what would you advise young men? You talked about money. I thought that was really interesting. So maybe we start there. Personal finance and establishing that. I'm a young man, so say 21 years old. What have I got to do with my money? Where should I be putting it? How should I be earning it?
Mm-hmm. So I think the three legs of the stool, we're going back to it, reallocating capital as a young man. One, start making some money. Two, put yourself in environments where you might have a random encounter with a stranger. Also, and I know you engage in this, we're going to reallocate 4 to 6 hours a week to physical fitness. Feeling strong, feeling in shape is one. There's studies coming out now that it's supposedly 50% better than pharmaceuticals and talk therapy. Two, you'll be more attractive to mates. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll be more kind. I think that is incredibly powerful. But in terms of economic success, and I have a book coming out in March on this, I think there's a basic algorithm to financial security or economic security. The first is focus, and that is focus, find something. I hate the term follow your passion because typically people mistake passion for a hobby. And they think, oh, I should be a DJ, or I should be an athlete, or I should open a restaurant. And they choose industries where the unemployment rate is 90+%. You know, the writers are on strike in Hollywood. There's 180,000 people in the actors union, SAG or AFTRA. And the percentage of them that don't, or that make more than $24,000 a year to qualify for health insurance is 12.5%. So I would argue that there's under or unemployment for 9 in 10 actors. So find something you're good at that where there's an employment rate of more than 90%. And I want to be clear, some people follow their passion and it pays off hugely. Jay-Z followed his passion, is now a billionaire. But I tell young men, assume you're not Jay-Z. Find something you're good at that has more than a 90+% employment rate, which is 99% of professions. And then invest the requisite 10,000 hours, perseverance, grit, willingness to break through hard things, willingness to suffer injustice, which is a guaranteed attribute of the workplace, and get really, really good at something, or at least have a path to being great to something. Also, in terms of being attractive to potential mates, there's very few things that are more attractive if you're not already economically successful than a plan. This is my plan, right? That's what I think potential romantic partners want. You don't need to be a baller. You don't need to be driving a Porsche, but you need to have a plan. And that plan might change. That plan might not work out. We got to have a plan. So the first is we're going to focus and we're going to find something we're good at, and not only something we're good at, but something people will pay us for. That's the first thing. You got to make money. But the second component, the key to wealth isn't as much how much money you make. It's your ability to live a little bit like a stoic and live below your means. And that's one thing I always did. I always lived below my means. I never had debt. I never used credit cards for stuff. And that is incredibly hard in our society, where every talented person, and now AI and algorithms, are finding you at a moment of vulnerability and convincing you that you need a new set of on-trainers. That, oh wait, it's worth it to upgrade from economy to economy comfort to economy plus to business class. I mean, it's just the market's ability in a capitalist market to find you a product you must have when you have any disposable income is just remarkable. There are so many amazing ways to spend money in London and New York that to not spend it all or not spend more than all is real discipline. That is That shows incredible character at a young age. You need to live like a stoic. Your advantage as a young person is, quite frankly, to live in a fucking shoebox and spend no money on rent. Spend no money. I used to make it a game. One summer at UCLA, and this was more out of survival or need, but if I didn't make $3,300 between my junior and senior year at UCLA, I wasn't going back to college. I owed the fraternity a ton of money. I wasn't going to be able to pay my tuition, so I had 11 weeks to make $3,300. And I figured out if I just lived in the fraternity in a shitty little room that I was paying no money for, and I only ate top ramen, bananas, and milk, I could live on $110 a week. That was my total budget, and I could do it. And when you're a young man, and not only that, it was still a fun summer. I would still go, we would pool money and go buy a case of Schmitty beer, and then on Sunday nights, we'd go to Sizzler, this tacky restaurant in LA, for a Bruin special, Malibu chicken, and all-you-can-eat salad bar. And I used to go with the other members of the crew team and just clear them out and spend 3 hours gorging. But we still had a good time. But when you're young, I think you want to lean into this great thing where you don't have to spend money. It is impossible not to spend money when you get a little bit older and you start collecting dogs and kids. You can't sleep on someone's couch. You can't sleep in a shitty apartment. You can't walk to work. You can't live on top ramen and bananas. So the ability to gamify and really try and live below your means. And then that creates an army of capital. And that army of capital goes out for you and starts making money for you when you're in your sleep. And that goes to specific investment advice. The first is, and people don't like to hear this, do away with the notion that you are brighter than anyone else and going to be able to figure out individual stocks or investments that will outperform the market. I can't convince you of that 100%, and some of it is fun. And if you want to learn about a stock and you want to buy NVIDIA or you want to buy Dogecoin, fine. But try not to do it with more than 30% of your saved money. Try to take 2/3 plus of your saved money and put it in low-cost ETFs and index funds. Because here's the thing, our flaw as a species is we don't realize how fast time goes. Because the majority of us, for the majority of history, have died before the age of 35, we can't process how fast time is actually going to go when you go past 35. At the age of 39, we no longer have the ability to process the way we change in terms of our own physical appearance. So from the age of 39 on, and I can validate this, every time you look in the mirror, you're like, fuck, what is that? Because you can't process what is happening to you, because for the majority of your species history, you weren't around post 39. You and I hopefully will be sitting here in 20 years or over a beer, and I'm going to look at you and I'm like, how fast did it go? And you're going to be like, Jesus, like a blink. And so if I said to you, Steven, find out a way to save $1,000, and in a blink, it's going to be worth 6,000 because I have this magic box. How hard would you try to get as much of that capital to put in that box? The power of diversification and time, because if you diversify, I can get you 6 to 8% a year, right? Every day, 51% of stocks go up, 49% go down. But if you invest in any 5 S&P stocks over 10 years and don't trade them, no one has ever lost money. 85% of day traders lose money. If you buy 5 stocks, put them away, and never look at them again, 10 years later, no one has ever lost money. So diversification, and this is where I really screwed up. I didn't understand the power of diversification. Successful people fall into the trap of thinking, I'm a baller, I'm smarter than everyone, I'm going all in on Cisco because everybody wants internet infrastructure. I'm going all in on Amazon. If you went all in on Amazon in 99, in 24 months, you had lost 90% of your principal. Even Amazon, the best companies in the world, if you look back, the majority of them have had 24-month periods where they went down 90%. But if you'd held on and you didn't day trade and you didn't look at your stocks, you'd be up 30 or 50x now. So the power of diversification, and also a recognition that time is just going to go so much faster than you think. So focus, find something you're good at that people will pay you for, live like a stoic, save, spend less than you save so you can develop an army of people who are killing it or killing people and invading the earth while you're in your sleep, recognizing the power of diversification, and then appreciating how fast time will go and not trading stocks, just let time take over. If we give every baby, and this is a potential solution to what I think is going to be an oncoming crisis among seniors, or too many of them that we can't take care of, if we gave for $40 billion from the U.S. budget, we could give every baby $7,000. And I think we treat them like infants, and we put it in a savings account, ETFs, diversified. By the time they're 65, just with that $7,000, if you didn't let them touch it or trade it, it'd be worth $1 million. So the fastest way to get every senior $1 million, and granted it's 65 years from now, would be to give every baby $7,000. And that just shows you the power of compound interest and time and diversification. I think it's fairly simple, those four things, but they're not easy to do. But everyone can do them. Almost everyone can do them.
And for anybody who really is, they've got, I don't know, $3,000 in their savings account. They have never invested a penny before in their life. They don't know any of the terminology we just used. They don't know what Vanguard means. They don't know what low fees mean. What is the simple way of getting them on the right track from that point of, I drive taxis, I've got $3,000 in my bank account or $500. What do I do?
Go to Charles Schwab or public.com, open an account, and first off, find out.
The equivalents in the UK are like Hargreaves Lansdown. You can do a lot of this stuff on a lot of different apps where you're picking a fund, right?
You go into SPY or go into an index or an ETF that buys a bunch of stocks for you. Make sure it's low fees and find out, and I wish I knew more about the tax law here, find out if your employer or the government offers you some sort of tax advantage vehicle. In the US, it's Roth and 401ks.
We have ISA, we have a retirement system where you can invest in your retirement, and
you have to understand that shit. And if you don't understand it, find your daughter or someone who can explain it to you. And then the key is just start and put it in an ETF or an index fund that tracks the entire market, low cost, low fees, and find out if you have access to anything that's tax advantage. But the key is to start.
But I only have $100.
Well, Christ, that $100 in 20 or 30 years will be 1,000 or more. And not only that, it gets you a taste for flesh. Like I remember I went on my first safari and they said the lion, unfortunately we had one lion attack a human, and now all of them appear to have a taste for human flesh. They never used to go after humans before, but once they get a taste for human flesh, they're like, oh, this tastes pretty good. Let's start killing and eating people. Just $100, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, it's worth 108. It's worth 112. You get a taste for the flesh of how powerful money and time and investing is, and just start. I also think it starts to make you feel, in a weird way, I think it makes you feel, and I'm just saying this because I can relate to it as a man, I think it makes you feel masculine, to feel like I'm taking care of myself. I'm strong enough to live below my means.
Discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like working out. You just feel better about yourself. And I think living below your means and creating an army of capital, everyone talks about starting a business that scales so they can make money in their sleep. That's their goal. You can make money in your sleep by saving it and investing it. But the key is just to start.